Eyes wide shut is a combination of the term eyes wide open, which indicates a clear vision of the truth, and the word shut, as in shut eyes, which indicates sleep or dreams. Thus the title Eyes Wide Shut is putting forth the idea that clear visions of truth are also available to us inside of our own dreams. We are all familiar with the concept that dreams can hold deeper meanings than their surface appearance, and that they can reveal truths about ourselves through their poetic imagery and metaphors. As Bill says,
"And no dream is ever just a dream."
It isn't crystal clear which sequences in Eyes Wide Shut are Bill's dreams and which are reality, but being able to distinguish between the two is unimportant. The important fact to keep in mind is that the film weaves in and out of these dreamlike sequences throughout its story, and that these dreamlike sequences reveal deep truths about Bill's state of mind. As Alice says,
we should be grateful. Grateful that we've managed to survive through all of our adventures, whether they were real or only a dream.
The iconic masked party sequence that Bill sneaks into is one of these dreamlike sequences. It's his processing and understanding of a party he attended the night before, Ziegler's party, in a metaphorical and dreamlike way. These two parties are both very extravagant and filled with powerful and wealthy guests. These guests are all wearing masks, literal masks at the masked party and metaphorical at Ziegler's party, which cover up their true forms as they act out their hedonistic desires. The hedonistic nature of Ziegler's party can be seen most clearly through the host's party, Ziegler himself, who was secretly doing drugs in the bathroom with a naked hooker named Mandy, who ends up overdosing. Other examples of the hedonistic nature of the party can be seen through Bill and his wife, Alice. Alice is approached and seduced by a Hungarian man who makes it clear that he wishes to sleep with her, while knowing full well that she is married. Meanwhile, Bill is seduced by two young girls before he is interrupted to attend to Mandy's overdose.
Bill, thanks for coming. Had a little accident here.
What happened?
It could also be said that the lighting fixtures had sexual overtones as well, being vaguely shaped like parts of the female anatomy. Bill reinterprets and re-examines the events that occurred to him at Ziegler's party through his metaphorical and dreamlike experiences at the masked party. We first need to realize that Bill sees himself as a good guy. He tells Alice that he isn't like any other guy.
Because I would never lie to you or hurt you.
This supposed superior morality of his is tested and shaken at Ziegler's party. The two young girls who try to seduce him, or try to take him where the rainbow ends, seem to be very effective in their seduction. Bill, who has forgotten about his waiting wife, doesn't seem to resist the adulterous two young girls. In fact, he seemed to be very interested in going to the end of the rainbow with them, until he was interrupted or saved by the Mandy situation.
Where the rainbow ends.
Don't you want to go where the rainbow ends?
Well, now that depends where that is.
Well, let's find out.
It's these specific series of events involving Bill, the two young girls, and the Mandy situation that Bill revisits in the dreamlike masked party sequence. Bill's secret hedonistic desires involving the two young girls is represented by Bill using lies and deception to sneak into the hedonistic masked party. But he is an unfamiliar outsider, and there's a real danger in becoming a member. There's the risk of being caught and exposed at the masked party, and risk to his marriage at the Ziegler party. An unknown woman at the masked party says to him,
"You are in great danger, and you must get away while there's still a chance."
This could be Bill's consciousness warning him of the dangers of his desires. But the warning is quickly dismissed as the unknown woman is taken away by another man, leaving Bill free to continue exploring deeper into the hedonistic party. We see a masked man, who is later hinted at to be Ziegler,
I was there.
acknowledge Bill. This masked man creates a situation where a seductive woman offers to take Bill somewhere more private, suggestive of a more intimate location where immoral desires can be fulfilled, much like the end of the rainbow.
Do you want to go somewhere a little more private?
This is very reminiscent of Ziegler's party, where Ziegler, the host of the party, has created a situation where the seductive two young girls offer to take Bill to the end of the rainbow as well. Just as he was at Ziegler's party, Bill seems very willing to let the seductive woman lead him to the more private area.
Private. That might be a good idea.
Until he is interrupted again by the unknown woman who had warned him earlier. We later find out that this unknown woman is Mandy, the hooker who overdosed in Ziegler's bathroom. She pulls Bill away from the seductive woman and warns him again of the dangers of the territory he is exploring.
I don't think you realize the danger you're in now. You can't fool them for much longer. You've got to get away before it's too late.
She's just stopped Bill from possibly ruining the sanctity of his marriage at the masked party, which is exactly what she had done at Ziegler's party, albeit unintentionally, by requiring his medical attention. Bill is then exposed by the masked party as an intruder. All the members of the party are made aware of him and proceed to encircle and face him. This signifies Bill's sudden recognition of his own potential for immoral behavior. He is confronted by the leader of the masked party, the man in red. Next to the man in red are two hooded figures in purple. These two purple figures could possibly represent the two young girls at Ziegler's party. Red is the first color of the rainbow and purple is the last. So the man in red could represent the start of the rainbow and the two hooded figures the end of the rainbow, as the two young girls did. Either way, Bill is then told to undress and become naked in front of the crowd. Bill is obviously unwilling to comply, for to be publicly undressed is shameful, and to be naked is to be vulnerable. He's saved from such a fate once again by Mandy, who offers herself as a sacrifice to save Bill. He is then free to go with his dignity intact, but before he goes, he is told to keep everything that had happened there a secret. This sequence of events mirror what happened at Ziegler's party once again. If Bill continued down the path to the end of the rainbow with the two young girls, as he was looking forward to doing, which can be evidenced when he says to them,
To be continued?
then he would have ended up removing his good husband and moral doctor masks to become part of the hedonistic party. This would have left him vulnerable to the possibility of public shaming and the ruin of his marriage, which was symbolized by the threat of undressing in front of the crowd. Once again, he is saved in both parties by Mandy. She sacrifices her well-being to give Bill the chance to remain a good husband and moral doctor. Again, she didn't do this consciously at Ziegler's party, but it doesn't matter because the end result is the same from Bill's point of view. Bill is then told by Ziegler at Ziegler's party to keep the hedonistic deeds he's witnessed a secret, just as he was at the masked party. Bill wasn't the only person to have a revelatory dream about the Ziegler party that night. He finds out that while he was at the masked party, his wife had had a nightmare. In Alice's nightmare, she and Bill were both in a deserted city, which represents Alice's presence at the Ziegler party, where she was somewhere unfamiliar and with no friends. She and Bill were both naked, showing how vulnerable she felt they were to the hedonistic advances of the party. She felt ashamed and frightened in a dream, caused by the vulnerability of being naked. She was also angry, because it was Bill who she blamed for making her feel that way. Maybe if Bill had paid more attention to her, they wouldn't be so emotionally vulnerable to outside forces. In her dream, Bill rushes away to find some clothing, leaving Alice alone just as he did at Ziegler's party when he left to talk to his friend Nightingale. As soon as Bill leaves her in her dream, she started to feel wonderful, just as she did at Ziegler's party, as it gave her the opportunity to receive genuine attention from an interested male, represented by the Hungarian man. In her dream, she has a grand old time being intimate with multiple partners, and she laughs at Bill as she does so. This represents the moment where Alice laughs at Bill when he assumes she's incapable of cheating on him, and she wants to rub this misconception of her into his face, as a form of revenge for not treating her as she ought to be treated. In another dreamlike sequence of Bill's, we see him enter a costume store called The Rainbow. Inside this store we see the same light fixtures that were up at Ziegler's party, as well as Christmas lights up on the walls of the store. This shows us that Bill's mind and thoughts are still present at Ziegler's party, and he's still chasing the end of the rainbow that enticed him there. Inside the costume store, Bill meets an underage girl who was attempting to secretly engage in a threesome with two older men. This is an inverse of Bill's situation at Ziegler's party. Bill was also about to secretly engage in a threesome, but with two younger women. The underage girl at the costume store therefore can be seen as Bill's representation of himself. She is supposed to be innocent and pure, but she is attempting to explore a corrupt and hedonistic world, which is how Bill might be seeing himself in that very moment. The underage girl says to Bill, "You should have a cloak lined with ermine." Ermine being a white stoat or weasel that royal cloaks were lined with in the medieval era to signify purity. This probably signifies Bill telling himself that the right thing to do would be to stop chasing the end of the rainbow and to maintain his morality. We can see later on that Bill ignores this suggestion by wearing an all-black cloak to the masked party. The underage girl's father, Milich, catches her with the two older men and disciplines her. Milich represents Bill's consciousness, which is trying to discipline his growing curiosity of his inner hedonistic desires. Bill returns to the costume store the next day to return his rented costume, after having spent a hedonistic night at the masked party. Here he finds out that the underage girl had also ended up spending a hedonistic night with the two older men. Not only that, but he finds out that Milich not only allowed it, but promoted it. He even offers his daughter to Bill for sale. This upsets Bill. It upsets him because Milich, who represents Bill's consciousness, which is responsible for disciplining his body into moral behavior, is now party to his body's immoral desires and even promotes it. This fact might not have upset Bill so much the night before, but after a night at the masked party, and under the bright light of the day, he sees more clearly the danger and immorality of this sort of behavior. In this sequence, Bill and Ziegler are in Ziegler's pool room. Ziegler taps on the red carpet of his pool table in the same pattern and rhythm that the man in the red cloak does on the red carpet of the masked party.
Was just,
There are also no Christmas lights up in the pool room, just like the masked party, even though the rest of Ziegler's house remains adorned with Christmas lights. This shows us that this pool room sequence relates to the masked party sequence in the same way the masked party sequence relates to Ziegler's party sequence. The pool room sequence is Bill's latest inspection of the events that took place at Ziegler's party. Ziegler blames Nightingale of being the cause of Bill's journey into the depths of the hedonistic world. This makes sense in the context of not only the dreamlike masked party, but also the literal reality of Ziegler's party. It was Nightingale's presence which split Bill away from Alice at Ziegler's party that gave him the opportunity to meet those two young girls. Nightingale also tells Bill that he has a habit of walking away because
It's a nice feeling. I do it a lot.
possibly planting the idea of doing what feels nice and walking away from responsibilities into Bill's subconscious mind. Bill reinterprets this meeting between himself and Nightingale through the dreamlike Sonata Cafe sequence. Here Nightingale gives Bill the opportunity to attend the masked party. He also tells Bill that he plays with
Anybody, anywhere.
in relation to his band. But within the context of the film and its themes, it's possible that Bill's subconscious understood this sexually. Back in the pool room, Bill confronts Ziegler with the fact that Mandy had been found dead in her apartment just after she sacrificed herself at the masked party to save Bill. Ziegler reassures Bill that the masked party wasn't involved in her death. Bill doesn't believe this, of course, and for good reason, for it turns out that Ziegler is lying. The news article detailing Mandy's death tells us that she was carried into her hotel room in a non-sober state by two large men at 4 a.m. shortly before she died. This is very similar to the way two large male members of the masked party dragged a beat-up Nightingale into his hotel room at 4:30 a.m. on the same night, as confirmed by the hotel clerk. Nightingale is also never heard from again in the story. Thus, we can conclude that the masked party did have a hand in Mandy's death in at least some part. Ziegler then ends the sequence by threateningly placing his hands on Bill's shoulders from behind and telling him that
Someone died. It happens all the time. But life goes on. It always does. Until it doesn't. But you know that, don't you?
we can see that this disturbs Bill. He's realizing that the end of the rainbow is filled with deception and danger. As Alexander Solzhenitsyn had said, the line between good and evil runs down the middle of every human heart. This means that inside every single person is the capacity for both good and evil. This evil, or dark side, that lies dormant in the majority of us is referred to as the shadow in Jungian psychology. The truly strong and mature are familiar with the shadow within oneself and of its nature, but are also aware of its dangers and so realize their need and responsibility to bring it under control with their consciousness. To be unaware of the shadow or unable to control it is a sign of weakness or childlike naivety. I believe that this childlike naivety of the shadow is present within Bill at the beginning of the film. He is ignorant of the shadow that lies within his wife, and by extension, all other women. He tells her that
Women don't. They basically just don't think like that.
in regards to thinking about immoral sexual deeds. This prompts Alice to open up his eyes to the shadow within her by giving him a peek into one of the most immoral and hedonistic fantasies she's been keeping inside, the story about her fantasies with the naval officer. This shocks Bill into realizing that there is a shadow inside of not only his wife, but inside of all women. From this point onwards in the story, nearly every female character Bill interacts with or sees is sexually immoral and hedonistic or a prostitute. An example of this would be at the masked party, where all the female characters are naked and on display for the men, or the woman who tries to betray her fiancé and throw away her promised future with him for an immoral night with Bill, just as Alice fantasized about doing the same thing with the naval officer. The difference between Alice and Bill is that Alice is mature enough to be aware of her shadow. Alice laughs at Bill cruelly, like an adult laughs at an ignorant child, when Bill displays his naivety by telling her that,
And I know you would never be unfaithful to me.
she laughs at Bill again in the same cruel manner in her dream while she's being intimate with other men. She is also experienced enough with her shadow to be able to control it, as evidenced by her ability to walk away from the Hungarian man at Ziegler's party, even though she might have not wanted to deep down inside. She is also mature enough to understand that the dream she had about the deserted city was horrifying, whereas Bill is a little bit slower to come to the realization that he should also be horrified of the dangers of his shadow. Bill is now also aware of the shadow within himself. He is subconsciously realizing how close he was to letting his shadow take control of him at the Ziegler party with the two young girls. We see this through all the preceding dreamlike sequences where Bill reinterprets and re-examines this event over and over again. The realization of his own shadow makes him question his current self-perception as well. He had always viewed himself as a good husband and professional doctor, as he says to his wife,
Sex is the last thing on this fucking hypothetical woman patient's mind.
Mandy, who Bill had a doctor-patient relationship with inside of Ziegler's bathroom, continuously appears, and always naked, in Bill's dreamlike sequences. We see him have sexually tense moments with her, and even almost kiss her corpse in the morgue. This contradicts the self-image Bill has of himself as a good husband and moral doctor. After recognizing the shadow within him, Bill begins to explore it. We see Bill's exploration through a series of situations he gets himself into, where he has the opportunity to act his shadow out and ruin the sanctity of his marriage. As these series of situations progress and Bill delves deeper and deeper into his shadow, we see his consciousness grow weaker and weaker. First, we see Bill with the daughter of his recently deceased patient. She tries to seduce Bill, but his consciousness is able to prevail and he resists her advances. Straight afterwards, we see a prostitute named Domino approach and seduce Bill. This time, Bill isn't so resistant. He follows her into her home and is just about to engage in his hedonistic desires with her when he receives a call from his wife. This wakes Bill's consciousness back up and he is able to resist his urges once more. Afterwards, Bill is told about the masked party by Nightingale. Bill is so desperate to attend this enticing party that he uses deception and lies to do so. Once inside the hedonistic party, he ignores all warnings of danger by Mandy, or his consciousness, and delves deeper into its pit. At this point, his consciousness is nowhere to be found, and his shadow's instincts run uninterrupted. His lack of consciousness continues on into the next night, where he tries to reconnect with his deceased patient's daughter and the prostitute Domino to fulfill his hedonistic desires. The shadow, or the dark side, and all the dangers it brings is appropriately symbolized by the night. It is in the night that Bill's shadow comes out to play. In the first night of the story, Bill is at the Ziegler party where he almost engages in his shadow's desires with the two young women, until he is interrupted by Mandy and her near-fatal drug overdose. In the second night of the story, Bill explores his shadow's desires by attending the masked party, until he is stopped by being unmasked, nearly publicly shamed and stripped naked. In the third night of the story, Bill actively engages with his shadow's desires with Domino's roommate, until he is stopped by the fact that Domino had contracted HIV, which he also would have contracted off of her if his consciousness hadn't saved him the night before. The danger represented in these sequences is symbolized in the dream-like sequence that directly precedes. Here we see a strange man, who represents the inherent danger of the shadow, is stalking Bill from behind as he journeys down the night street. Bill notices the suspicious figure and becomes wary. The stalker continues to follow Bill, at which point Bill runs across the street and stares directly at the stalker. His attentive stare signifies that he is now fully aware of the danger that has been following him throughout his nighttime activities. He pays conscious attention to the stalker until the stalker walks away and disappears, at which point Bill picks up a newspaper that reads "Lucky to be alive" on the front page. From this point on, after fully realizing the dangers that lie just behind him in the night, Bill begins to control the shadow within him by stopping his pursuit of the end of the rainbow. Conversely, the shadow takes a back seat during the daytime sequences in this film. Bill's consciousness returns and controls most of his actions during the day. For example, it is during the day that he returns to the rainbow costume store and becomes upset at Millich for allowing his daughter to act immorally. He is still trying to find out information about the masked party during the day, but he is more investigative rather than enticed. The day after the masked party takes place, he revisits the house the party was held at, Anne Nightingale's hotel, in the hopes of finding out the truth of that night. In these sequences, during the sober daytime, Bill first notices the dangers of getting drunk on the shadow of the night. His safety is first threatened by the people at the location of the masked party. He then finds out through the hotel desk clerk that Nightingale was beaten and removed from his hotel by force by members of the masked party. Together with the night, the color blue also represents the shadow and its inherent dangers. The nighttime locations are filled with splashes of blue light. Whenever a character thinks dangerous thoughts or speaks dangerous words, the color blue is present in the background. Here are a few examples. Alice gets up off of her bed and stands in front of a blue window just as she begins to attack Bill and reveal her hedonistic fantasies. Bill watches a couple engage inappropriately in public, which reminds him of his wife and the naval officer, while there is a blue marquee behind him. Nightingale tells Bill about the masked party, while there is a large neon blue sign behind him. Mandy stands in front of a large blue window when she sacrifices herself to the dangerous masked party. Alice stands in front of a blue shower curtain when she decides to use recreational drugs, and the examples go on. Characters that Bill sees as dangerous, or potentially so, are often dressed in blue. We see this with Ziegler, who is in a blue shirt during the pool room sequence, and Millich during Bill's second visit to the rainbow costume store, just to name a few. Blue doors are used to represent the entrance to many dangerous locations. The blue gate to the masked party, the blue door to Domino's apartment, The blue door to Bill's office, which, as Mandy's constant nude reoccurrence in Bill's dream has shown us, portrays the idea that no matter how professional Bill thinks he is as a doctor, his shadow is present when he examines attractive clients. And the blue door to his own apartment, which is interesting because only the outside part of this door is blue. The walls outside his apartment are also blue. I think that this is used to symbolize all the dangers that lie outside in the world that is trying to creep into Bill's life, as signified by the blue light that seeps into some of the rooms in his apartment, one of which being his daughter's room. He watches his daughter sleep in this blue tinted room with worry, probably about the dangers that surround her life as a female, as he had just spent a night with a series of morally questionable women who were willing to be used by men to fulfill their hedonistic desires. Another more literal use of a blue tint would be the visualization of Bill's imagination of his wife with the naval officer, which he conjures up multiple times throughout the film to fuel his anger and thirst for vengeance. We see Christmas lights constantly throughout the film as we follow Bill on his nighttime adventures. These colourful Christmas lights represent the rainbow that the two young girls at Ziegler's party mentioned to Bill. These Christmas lights can be seen as a rainbow road that Bill is following in the hopes of reaching its end, with the promise of hedonistic desires entice his shadow. We especially see these Christmas lights at the entrances of locations where Bill is put into a situation where his shadow's desires are tempted or advanced. These locations include the Ziegler house, the deceased patient's daughter's room, Domino's house, the Rainbow Costume Store, and multiple others. The only locations that Bill visits during the night, apart from his own bedroom, that do not have Christmas lights up can be seen as the end of the rainbow, or the place where the truth of the dangers of the shadow reveal themselves. The first such place is Ziegler's bathroom, where immoral sex and substance abuse threatens a person's life. The second would be the masked party, where hedonism, deception, and threats run amok. The third would be the morgue, where Bill sees Mandy's corpse and the death that the shadow can bring you. The fourth would be Ziegler's pool room, which coupled with his bathroom seem to be the only two rooms in his house that are not adorned with Christmas lights. In this pool room is where Bill fully realizes the lies and threats to his life that the rainbow road he was on has led him to. As mentioned earlier, the pool room is another dreamlike sequence where Bill re-examines his experience with the two young girls. However, this time he did not arrive at the pool room by choice, as he did with the masked party or Ziegler's party. This time he was called upon by Ziegler himself. This is because the pool room sequence happens after Bill escapes his stalker and finds out about the death of Mandy. He's unwilling, but still called upon to re-examine his shadow once more. This would explain the lack of anything hedonistic or sexual during the pool room sequence. Only the threats, lies, and death remain. After Bill's complete understanding of the dangers of the shadow within him, he turns off the Christmas lights up in his home. This signifies his decision to stop chasing the end of the rainbow and to keep his shadow in check. Eyes Wide Shut shows us the importance of intimate attention in a marriage. The opening shot of the film is an attention-grabbing image of Alice in black high heels removing her elegant black dress. The very next sequence shows that Bill's attention is elsewhere, specifically on his misplaced wallet. He then charges into the bathroom while Alice is sitting on the toilet, showing us that there is no mystique left in their marriage, and that maybe they are overly comfortable with each other, to the point of being nearly unaware of one another. Alice asks Bill how her hair looks, to which Bill replies mechanically without even looking at her.
Is my hair okay?
It's great.
You're not even looking at it.
This again reinstates how little Bill pays attention to his wife. This pattern continues at Ziegler's party when Bill abandons Alice to first meet Nightingale and then to flirt with the two young girls. Bill's inattention leaves Alice's mind and body seeking intimacy from elsewhere, but she is bound down by her marriage, so instead she is only left with feelings of resentment. Her wandering mind and seeking of intimacy from elsewhere is represented by her great interest in the Hungarian man who was flirting with her, and her wandering eyes while making love to Bill after Ziegler's party, possibly because she's still thinking about the Hungarian man. Her resentment is shown by her drowning a flute of champagne as soon as Bill leaves her, her mocking laughter at Bill in both her dream about the deserted city and in reality when Bill tells her that women don't think about sex like men do, and the way she used her fantasy about the naval officer to attack and hurt Bill. Instead of addressing her resentment and Bill's inattention truthfully and head-on, Alice let it fester within her, which only helped the resentment towards her husband and her marriage to grow. Bill's inattention and Alice's resentment both kick-started Bill's dangerous adventures into the night, which nearly ruined their marriage and family. Bill realizes the damage his lies and naivety could have caused his marriage when he sees his mask, or false self-perception, on his bed next to his wife. This prompts Bill to cry like a child in Alice's arms. Overcome with guilt, he confesses his sins to her. Alice forgives Bill, telling him that they should be grateful that they and their marriage survived the adventures that they had with their shadows, and that
the reality of one night, let alone that of a whole lifetime, can ever be the whole truth.
Meaning that there is still a lot more room for growth for the both of them within their marriage. She also reassures Bill by telling him that
the important thing is we're awake now. And hopefully for a long time to come.
awake as in away from the dangers of the night, and awake as in aware of what's evil and what's good. Only once they can distinguish evil from good can they consciously choose to avoid evil and stay on the path of good. Like a desperate child, Bill replies to her with a hopeful
Forever.
Alice, who is a little bit more wiser than Bill through her experiences with her own shadow, is appropriately wary of that word, for forever is a really long time, and answers,
Let's not use that word. You know, it frightens me.
Instead, she offers a solution to their marital problems. She suggests that they begin to pay more truthful, honest, and intimate attention to each other as soon as possible.
And you know, there is something very important that we need to do as soon as possible.
What's that?